A billion-dollar warship was paralyzed in open waters. No one could fix it. No manual worked. No system responded. Then the admiral gave a single order. Bring him back. Sir, we stripped him of everything. I know, he said, but this ship still remembers him, even if we tried to forget. The USS Liberty Hawk was in motion. A floating fortress, nuclear-powered. Over 100,000 tons of steel, slicing through international waters on a classified mission. Above deck, the noise was familiar. Fighter jets launching, sailors coordinating, engines humming in precision. But then, it stopped. Not gradually, not with warning. Everything went dark in one breathless second. The main power core shut down without a single error code. No surge, no explosion, just silence, the kind that wraps around your spine and refuses to let go. Within minutes, the emergency teams were activated. Engineers poured into the core deck like blood rushing to a wound. 80 of the Navy's best technicians, all trained in nuclear systems, all confident at first. They rebooted the system, recalibrated diagnostics, even switched to emergency backups. Nothing. Screens stay black. No hum, no flicker, no clue. The Liberty Hawk, the billion-dollar powerhouse, had gone quiet. In the command room, tension had weight. It wasn't just about one ship. This vessel was carrying encrypted assets and a security payload meant to prevent a conflict halfway across the globe. Time wasn't a luxury. It was a fuse already burning. Rear Admiral Collins stood over the system map, calm, at least on the outside. Around him, officers whispered possibilities. Could be sabotage, a cyber attack, a critical internal failure. Every theory was worse than the one before. Then a voice, young, hesitant, broke through the noise. Sir, there was someone. The room fell still. A man who once fixed something like this. Years ago, on this ship. Collins didn't answer. Not immediately. He turned slowly, eyes distant, as if chasing ghosts through memory. The room waited. You're talking about Vale? He said, finally. The young officer nodded. Yes, sir. Chief Marcus Vale. Another officer chimed in, uneasy. But, sir, he was dishonorably discharged. Stripped of rank. We erased him from the system after the Bering incident. A long silence. The name alone, Vale, carried weight. Rumors. Whispers in hallways. A man once called the soul of the engine room, until the day they push him out. Admiral Collins exhaled. He was stripped of his title, he said, but not of what he knows. More silence. Then a single, undeniable command. Bring him back. There was no applause. No excitement. Just a quiet understanding that the Navy's most advanced warship had no answers left, except the one they chose to forget. Outside, the ocean rocked gently beneath the stillness of steel. And somewhere, far from this place, a man was about to be interrupted, not by orders, but by a debt the Navy never expected to repay. 25 years. Chief Marcus Vale had given a quarter of a century to the USS Liberty Hawk. He knew every hallway, every panel, every vibration that moved through her steel bones. They used to say the ship breathed through him, until the day they buried his name. Officially, it was called the Bering Incident. Unofficially, no one talked about it. Some said he disobeyed a direct order. Others whispered that he saved lives, hundreds, by doing what command wouldn't. But in the end, that didn't matter. He was stripped of rank, discharged without ceremony, and erased like a smudge on a whiteboard. Years passed. The Liberty Hawk moved on. New crews, new technology, new wars. But some systems still bore his fingerprints, deep in the code, deep in the structure. And now, with the ship silenced and helpless in open waters, they had no choice but to say his name again. New Mexico, a quiet desert town where the days bled together. The garage was small. Dust clung to every corner. Old country music played softly from a radio that had lost one speaker decades ago. Inside, Marcus Vale knelt beneath a rusted pickup, hands covered in oil, a wrench in his grip. Hair silver, shoulders broad, face carved by time and regret. He worked with no rush, just rhythm, until he heard it. boots crunching gravel. He slid out from under the truck, wiped his hands, and stood. 3 men in uniform, straight-backed, uninvited. Vale didn't speak at first. He just looked at them like someone staring at ghosts, then backed down at the wrench in his hand. "I figured this day might come," he muttered. His voice was low, rough like sandpaper, not angry, just tired. The younger officer stepped forward. "Sir, we need your help. It's the Liberty Hawk. She's—" Vale raised a hand, stopping him. "I heard," he said. The older officer, a commander, cleared his throat. "You know she's dead in the water. No one can restart her, not even with full diagnostics." Vale gave a dry laugh. "She's not dead. She's waiting." They didn't know what to say to that, but the silence said everything. Vale walked past them, grabbed a rag from the table, wiped his hands, then poured himself a cup of black coffee. "Tell me something," he said, not turning around. "Why now? Why me?" The commander hesitated. "We tried everything else. So, I'm your last resort?" Vale asked quietly. The youngest officer stepped forward again. "No, sir. You're the only one who's ever made her listen." That gave Vale pause. He looked out the dusty window. The horizon stretched endlessly. Freedom, peace, the life he had chosen after being discarded. Then he spoke, more to himself than anyone. "Liberty Hawk, still too proud to die, huh?" He turned back to them. "All right, I'll come." The men exchanged glances, surprised. "But understand something," Vale said, voice sharp now. "I'm not doing this for the Navy. Not for ranks. Not for redemption. I'm doing it for her." He set the cup down, picked up a small, worn toolbox, closed the garage door behind him without another word. As the transport chopper lifted off from the desert floor, Vale stared out the window in silence. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the sand. Behind him, the world he built in exile faded. Ahead, a ghost waited in the middle of the sea, still, silent, and possibly beyond saving. But Vale knew better. Some things don't die. They just wait for the right hands to bring them back to life. When Marcus Vale stepped onto the flight deck of the Liberty Hawk, the air changed, not because of who he was, but because of who they thought he used to be. Young sailors paused what they were doing. Some whispered. Some stared. None saluted. He didn't expect them to. He didn't care. He walked with purpose, toolbox in one hand, coffee in the other, past rows of steel, past officers with medals, past engineers who had tried and failed. All of them had read about him. Few had ever met him. Fewer still believed he belonged here. In the engine core, the silence was louder than before. The main systems were still cold. Monitors dark. No readouts. No pulse. Vale stood in the middle of the room and closed his eyes. He didn't reach for a keyboard. He didn't ask for status reports. He just listened. Then, slowly, he placed his hand on the bulkhead wall, fingers pressed against the steel. "She's not dead," he said softly. "She's angry." The engineers exchanged glances. "Excuse me?" one of them asked. Vale opened his eyes. "There's a difference. Dead means she's gone. This—" he paused. "This is resistance. She's pushing back." They looked at each other, puzzled. But Vale didn't wait for permission. He moved through the levels, down through heat vents, under panels, into access shafts long sealed shut. He knew every inch of her, not from manuals, but from memory. Along the way, he began checking wires by touch, smelling for burnt traces, listening to vibrations through his fingertips. "Diagnostics miss what intuition finds," he murmured. After 6 hours, he paused at a junction box, a tangled knot of upgraded tech layered over the ship's original framework. He sighed. "There's your problem," he said. The engineers leaned in. "What is it?" They tried to modernize her, plugged in systems she was never meant to carry. Digital command layers fighting analog foundations. No one speaking her native tongue anymore. "So, is it a software issue?" Vale gave a dry smile. "It's a soul issue." He didn't ask for tools. He brought his own. Old, worn, but trusted like him. For the next 12 hours, he worked nonstop. No sleep, no breaks, just caffeine and instinct. He soldered new connections where others wouldn't dare. Bypassed entire control pathways with custom reroutes. Reconnected feedback loops that hadn't been touched in over a decade. When one young technician offered help, Vale looked at him kindly and said, "You want to fix her? Don't just look at her. Listen, she's not a machine. She's a conversation." By hour 16, sweat soaked through his shirt. His hands trembled, but he kept going. Not because he wanted glory, but because she needed him, because he needed her. Finally, as the ship's nuclear heart began to warm, a low, almost imperceptible hum returned. It traveled through the floor, into his boots, into his bones. Vali's Milet. She was waking up. The young technician stared at the console. "It's responding. Sir, it's responding." Vale didn't answer. He simply whispered, "I told you. You don't fix something like this. You earn its trust again." Episode 4. The Sound of Redemption. For hours, there had been nothing but the low hum of tools, the clinking of metal, and the rhythmic tapping of a single, persistent mind at work. Chief Marcus Vale hadn't slept. His eyes were red, his hands stained with oil, but there was something unshakable in his focus, like a man not just repairing steel, but rebuilding something within himself. And then, a flicker, a tiny spark of green light blinked from the main control panel. Barely noticeable, but Vale saw it. He walked over slowly, like a man approaching an old friend he hadn't seen in years. He touched the panel gently, closed his eyes, and whispered, "There you are." With a slow inhale, he reached forward and flipped the final switch. For a second, silence, just the creak of the hull and the shallow breathing of engineers holding their breath. Then, a deep, thunderous roar. The engines, alive, awake, roaring back like a sleeping beast startled by its master. The deck trembled. Every bolt, every panel shivered. The air filled with a sound no one on that ship had heard in months. The Liberty Hawk, breathing. Gasps echoed. One by one, engineers turned from their stations. Mechanics stepped back from their tools. Even the young techs, who had doubted Vale the moment he arrived, stood frozen in disbelief. And then, a shout, followed by another. Cheers, laughter, relief. But none of them louder than the silence that followed when Vale stepped down from the platform. He didn't smile. He didn't raise his hands for praise. He simply walked to the side and wiped the sweat from his brow with a grease-stained rag. One of the young engineers approached him, the same one who had watched Vale work for 18 straight hours without understanding a thing he was doing. The young man extended his hand. Vale looked at it for a moment, then shook it firmly. "Sir, I didn't believe in you," the engineer said. "Vale vyplaiji. You didn't need to. The ship did." From across the deck, a tall figure approached. Admiral Richter. For a second, the entire crew quieted again. The weight of history, of rank, of past decisions, hung in the air like a storm about to break. Richter stopped a few feet away. There was a pause. "I was wrong," the admiral said. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a mixture of guilt and awe. "We stripped you of your name, your honor, because we couldn't understand what you did back then, and we never asked why." Vale looked at him, not with anger, but with the calm of the man who had made peace long ago. "I'm not here for you," he said softly. "I didn't do this for redemption. I did it for her." He turned and gently placed a hand on the engine housing. "She trusted me once, and I wasn't going to let her die like this." A moment passed, and then, the unexpected, one of the crewmen stepped forward. He stood tall and saluted, then another, and another, until the entire engineering crew, young and old, stood in formation, saluting not a superior officer, but a man whose rank they couldn't see, but whose value they could no longer deny. Vale didn't return the salute. He didn't need to. He just nodded, then turned and walked down the corridor toward the lower decks. Not a hero, not a savior, just a man who remembered the language of steel and answered when it cried. The metal glistened under the harsh deck lights. A polished silver star mounted on a ribbon of navy blue and crimson. It was the highest honor the Navy could bestow, given only to those who had saved not just ships, but missions, lives, and dignity. But Chief Marcus Vale didn't even glance at it. "I didn't do it for this," he said softly, pushing the velvet box back toward the admiral. "I only came to make sure no one died." Admiral Rourke didn't argue. He simply closed the box and held it close to his chest. Vale adjusted the strap on his duffel bag. After 6 long days aboard the USS Liberty Hawk, the carrier was not just operational, it was performing better than it had in years. Engines roared back to life. Power surged through every corridor. Radar systems hummed. The deck was alive again. And Chief Vale was exhausted. But it wasn't a physical fatigue. It was something deeper. He'd buried this part of his life. The Navy had cast him out, stripped his rank, and erased his name from every hangar and hallway. And yet now, when everything broke, they remembered him, used him, and now they wanted to pin a medal on him like it could rewrite the past. He wasn't angry, just finished. He made his way toward the rear helipad, where a transport chopper was waiting to take him home. As he walked across the deck, sailors moved aside. Some whispered. Others stood silently, hats off, eyes forward. Then, just before he reached the chopper stairs, a voice rang out. "Attention on deck." It was shouted by a young seaman. Clear, strong, loud enough to stop the wind. Suddenly, dozens, then hundreds of sailors snapped into formation across the flight deck. Officers, mechanics, pilots, even the kitchen staff. One by one, backs straightened, boots clicked, every eye faced forward. Not one of them looked at him. They didn't have to. This wasn't for show. It was respect, a silent apology, a single gesture that said more than medals or speeches ever could. Vale froze. The hum of the helicopter blades softened. The only thing he could hear was the sound of fabric and boots tightening into salute posture. Then, Admiral Rourke stepped forward, holding a small object wrapped in navy blue cloth. He unfolded it slowly. Inside was the ship's flag, folded precisely, 3 corners up, a perfect triangle, exactly as it should be. "This flag has flown on Liberty Hawk since the day she launched," Rourke said. "It's been through storms, wars, and silence." He extended it toward Vale. "She still remembers who kept her alive." Vale took it with both hands. His lips pressed together. No smile, no tears, only a breath. A long, quiet breath. As he turned toward the chopper, he stopped, looked over the ship one last time. And then he spoke. Not loud, not commanding, just honest. "This ship never forgot me," he said. He paused, and then added, barely a whisper, "But did any of you?" He didn't wait for an answer. He climbed aboard. The hatch closed, and as the rotors began to rise, the entire flight deck held their salute, until the chopper disappeared into the morning sky. A month later, Marcus Vale's home was a quiet one. A small farmhouse tucked away in the hills of West Virginia. No neighbors for miles. No cell service. Just the sound of wind in the trees and the ticking of old clocks. He'd returned to his routines. Oil changes, coffee at sunrise, fixing things nobody asked him to fix. But something had changed. Every morning, a new letter arrived. Some handwritten, some typed. From sailors, from officers, even from the families of crew members. They all said the same thing. "I was there when you saved us. I wish I'd known your name before. You gave us back our ship and reminded us what honor really means." One day, a large box came in the mail. Inside was a small, hand-forged plaque. Chief Engineer Marcus Vale, USS Liberty Hawk, Honorary Command Master Technician. The man the ship remembered. He smiled just a little and mounted it on the wall above the fireplace. Final call. The Navy never officially reinstated his rank. But something else happened. The next time the Liberty Hawk returned to port, the entire engineering bay bore a new name. Etched in bronze, sealed in resin. Vale's Bay, where silence spoke louder than orders. Young cadets were trained on the Vale Protocol, a new diagnostic approach to catastrophic system failure, based on the exact steps Vale used to revive the Liberty Hawk. And in one final act of quiet reverence, the ship's computer core was named. Marcus, Mechanical Adaptive Real-Time Command Unit System. No speeches, no press release, just a nod from the heart of the ship to the man who had saved it. Epilogue. Back on the farm, Vale sat on his porch one evening, watching the sun drop below the hills. A young officer, fresh out of the academy, pulled up in a dusty Jeep. Chief Vale, he asked. Vale nodded. I came to thank you in person. I'm the new systems engineer aboard Liberty Hawk. Your protocols saved us again last week. Vale didn't say much, just poured 2 coffees. They sat in silence for a while. Then the officer stood, saluted sharply, and said, Sir, permission to shake the hand of a legend. Vale chuckled, took his hand, and said, I'm no legend. I'm just the man the ship remembered. Backend index pointing right, CTA, Koi video. If you believe some people deserve a second chance, share this story. Because heroes don't always wear stripes. Sometimes they walk away, quietly. Disclaimer. This is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes only, using AI-assisted tools in writing and narration. Any resemblance to real events, secret government operations, or actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. The story, characters, agencies, and incidents portrayed are entirely fictional. No identification with actual government agencies, military operations, or events is intended or should be inferred.